I opened my eyes on Thanksgiving morning and heard nothing. When you've been around as long as I have, 73 years, you get used to different kinds of quiet. There's the peaceful kind that feels like a soft blanket. There's the lonely kind that echoes around your heart. But that morning, the silence felt like something else entirely. It felt wrong. I've always been the kind of person whose body knows the time better than any alarm clock. Even now, I still wake up at 5:30 on the dot, the same way I have for decades. Most Thanksgivings, I'd wake up even earlier, with that calm, quiet excitement older folks get when a big family day is coming. Normally, I'd already be thinking about the turkey I needed to season, the potatoes I'd peel while the parade played on TV in the background, the way my grandkids' faces would brighten as soon as they smelled pumpkin pie in the oven. But that morning, I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, and something felt off. The house was too still, too empty. I pushed myself up slowly, my knees complaining the way they do these days, and reached for my robe. The fabric was worn soft over the years, and it still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets I keep tucked into my drawers. I shuffled to my bedroom door and stopped with my hand on the knob, listening. Nothing. No small feet pounding down the hallway. No kids' shows blaring from the TV. No rich smell of coffee drifting up the stairs. And that was odd, because my son Michael is usually the one who makes the first pot. He knows I like my coffee strong, hot, and ready for me. When I come down, I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Morning light poured through the window at the end of the hall, soft and golden. The kind of light that usually makes a home feel warm and safe. But it didn't reach me. The house felt hollow, like it was just a building and not a home. "Michael?" I called, my voice sounding smaller than I expected in the emptiness. "Amanda?" No answer. I made my way down the hall, peeking into the guest room where my grandchildren usually sleep when they stay over. Both beds were neatly made. The blankets were smooth, pillows untouched. The stuffed animals the kids always drag around with them were nowhere to be seen. My heartbeat picked up a little. Not fear, not yet, just confusion. Maybe they went out early, I told myself. Maybe Michael decided to beat the rush and go to the store first thing. Or maybe Amanda had taken the kids to watch them set up for the parade downtown. Yes, I thought, that must be it. I walked down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. The steps in this house are steep, and I've learned not to trust my balance the way I used to. With every step, I half expected to hear a door close or someone calling out that they were back, but the house stayed quiet. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped dead in the doorway. The counters were spotless, too spotless. On Thanksgiving morning, my kitchen is usually a beautiful disaster bowls sitting out, bags of flour and sugar open, butter softening on plates. A little flour dusted across the counter from rolling out pie crusts, evidence of a feast in progress. Instead, every surface was empty, clean, perfect. I walked to the coffee maker and laid my hand on it. Cold. That was when my eyes drifted to the window over the sink. I stepped closer, pressed my palm against the cool glass, and looked out at the driveway. Both cars were gone. Michael's truck, the one I'd helped him with the down payment on 2 years ago. Amanda's SUV, the one she'd said she absolutely needed for the kids. 2 empty spaces, just dark oil stains where their vehicles usually sat. Before I go on, let me ask you something. I'd really like to know where you're listening to this from and what time it is for you right now. Are you cooking your own Thanksgiving meal while this plays in the background? Are you lying in bed at night, sitting in your car, taking a break? Tell me in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home in any way, please tap that like button and subscribe. I share these stories because I honestly believe that hearing each other's truths matters. Your support helps me keep telling them. All right, let me take you back to that kitchen. I turned away from the window, my brain trying to line up what my eyes were seeing with what I knew, or thought I knew. There had to be a simple explanation. Michael wouldn't just leave without saying something. Just yesterday, we talked about today. He'd asked what time I wanted to start cooking. He'd asked if I needed him to pick up anything from the store. And then I saw it. A sheet of paper lay on the counter, folded neatly and held in place by a little turkey-shaped magnet I'd bought at a craft fair years ago. My hands were strangely steady as I picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was Amanda's. I recognized it immediately. Tidy, slanted just a little, the kind of handwriting that always looks pretty without trying. I read the note once, then again. Then a third time, as if staring at the words long enough might force them to say something different. Mom, please don't worry. We decided to spend Thanksgiving in Hawaii this year. You wouldn't have liked the flight, so we thought it best to let you rest at home. Back in a week, love, Amanda. I stood there in the kitchen holding that note, and the strangest thing happened. I didn't cry. I really thought I would. I expected that awful burn behind the eyes, the tightness in the chest, the lump in the throat, the kind of pain that squeezes tears out whether you want them or not. But none of that came. Instead, I felt calm, very calm. I read the note again, paying attention to certain words. We decided. Not, we wanted to ask if you'd like to come. Not, we hoped you'd understand. Just, we decided. And then that line about the flight, you wouldn't have liked the flight. Said so casually, as if they knew exactly what I would or wouldn't want. As if leaving me behind was somehow an act of concern for my comfort. And not because I didn't fit into their plans, I smoothed the paper with my palm, set it gently back in the counter, and went to the coffee maker. My body moved automatically. Scoop the grounds, pour the water, press the button. The machine began its little gurgling routine, and I watched the coffee drip, drip, drip into the empty pot. The wall clock ticked away above me, 6:15 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day. When the coffee was ready, I poured myself a cup, added cream the way I like it, and carried it to the kitchen table. I sat in my usual chair, the one facing the backyard where I can see the bird feeder. As I watched, a cardinal fluttered down, bright red against the pale morning sky. It pecked at the seeds for a moment and then flew off, unconcerned, free. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and took a slow sip, and for the first time in a very long time, I allowed myself to think clearly, truly, clearly. Not about what I was supposed to feel, not about what a good mother would do, not about keeping the peace, just about what was real. And the truth was simple. I was sitting alone in a house on Thanksgiving morning, drinking coffee I'd made for myself after my son and his family had flown to Hawaii without even telling me they hadn't called. They hadn't invited me. They hadn't even told me to my face. They'd left a note. I put my cup down and let my eyes travel slowly around the kitchen. really seeing it. The refrigerator I'd bought when they said theirs wasn't big enough. The new curtains I'd sewn because Amanda wanted a more modern look. The table where I'd served hundreds of meals, always making sure everyone else got seconds before I took my first bite. Sitting there with that note on the counter and an empty driveway outside, something inside me shifted. No tears, no yelling, just thought. As I drank my coffee, my mind drifted backward, not to escape what was happening, but to understand how I'd ended up here. For me, it really started 3 years earlier, when my husband Harold died. We'd been married for 48 years. He passed away in his sleep, quietly, in our own bed. Everyone kept telling me that was a blessing. Maybe it was. But blessing or not, the hole he left in my life didn't feel very blessed. The little house we'd bought when Michael was a baby suddenly seemed too big and too empty. I remember standing in our bedroom a few weeks after the funeral, staring at Harold's side of the closet. His shirts still hung there, pressed and waiting. I couldn't bring myself to touch them. That was around the time Michael started showing up more. He called every day, brought over groceries I hadn't asked for, stopped by just to check. At first, I was grateful. It felt good to know someone cared enough to keep an eye on me, that I wasn't completely floating out there alone. Then, one evening, he sat down with me at my kitchen table. The same table where Harold and I had shared thousands of meals. "Mom," he said gently, his voice full of concern, "I've been thinking. You shouldn't be alone right now. It's not good for you." I told him I was managing. I was. Grief is heavy, but I'd always understood the difference between being alone and being lonely. Still, Michael kept going. "Amanda and I have been talking. We've got that extra room downstairs. The kids would love having you around. And honestly, Mom, we could use your help. Amanda's working full-time now, and daycare costs a fortune." He said it like it was a mutual solution, like we'd all be helping each other. A partnership. "You could stay in your house, sure," he said. "But wouldn't it be nice to wake up to the grandkids' voices? To be around family?" Put that way, how was I supposed to say no? I pictured my quiet mornings, making coffee for one, eating dinner alone while the TV mumbled in the background. The idea of living in a house full of life, noise, and purpose felt like exactly what I needed. So I said yes. Michael hugged me tightly and promised, "It's going to be wonderful, Mom. We'll take such good care of you." What he didn't mention right away was that they needed help with a down payment on a bigger house. The place they were renting was too small. But, he said, if we combined resources, we could get a nice place with room for everyone. I had money. Harold and I had been careful. The life insurance policy was generous. Michael called it an investment in the family's future. I wrote the check without a moment's hesitation. Looking back now, the picture is clear. At the time, I was just a fresh widow who didn't want to feel useless. The first few months in the new house were exactly what I'd imagined. I woke up to the sound of my grandchildren giggling through the wall. Amanda would ask for my help in the kitchen. Michael settled into a habit of sitting with me most evenings, telling me about work I felt needed again. I watched the kids while they worked, packed lunches, checked homework, read bedtime stories. When Amanda mentioned the washing machine had died, I bought a new one. When Michael said the electric bill was killing them that winter, I quietly took over paying the utilities. Helping felt good. Being useful felt even better. They constantly called me a blessing. You're such a blessing, Mom. We're so blessed to have you here. I wore that word like a badge. Then, little by little, things changed. It wasn't dramatic. No big blow up. Just a slow slide that I didn't see until I was standing at the bottom. Requests for help turned into expectations. Thank you slowly vanished. You're such a blessing faded into we're counting on you. The first time I said I wanted to visit my friend Dorothy for the weekend, Amanda blinked at me and said, "But who's going to watch the kids?" The night I said I was too tired to cook dinner, Michael frowned. "We were counting on you, Mom." That sentence became a regular visitor in our house. I started to feel less like family and more like unpaid staff. But every time that thought poked at me, I scolded myself. They're working so hard, they're stressed. This is what family does. We help each other, right? Then came the moment that should have jolted me awake. About 6 months ago, I caught a spring cold. Nothing serious, but I went to bed early. My door was cracked open as I lay there half asleep. I heard Amanda in the hallway talking on the phone. I know, she sighed, her voice carrying that tired, complaining tone people use when they're venting. She means well, but she's stuck in her ways. She wants everything done her way. Sometimes it's easier to just work around her. I lay perfectly still. There was a pause while the other person spoke. Then Amanda said, "Oh, we can't ask her to leave. Michael would feel guilty forever. And we need her. The money, the help with the kids. We'd be lost without her." A short pause. "Her money," she added quietly. "Honestly, it's her money we'd be lost without, not her." The words hit like a bucket of ice water. She kept talking. "But between you and me, I miss having my own house. Just our space, you know. It's nice having the help, but sometimes I just want my home back." Our space. My home. As if I were a guest who had stayed a little too long. As if this weren't the same house my money helped buy. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her. I just lay there staring at the ceiling and stuffing those words into a dark drawer in my mind. Because where would I go? What would I do? I convinced myself I'd misheard, that she was just overwhelmed, that she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. But after that night, I started noticing more. How they'd plan things without asking if I wanted to join. How Amanda would redo the kitchen after I cooked, moving things to how she liked them. How Michael kept calling it his house and his mortgage, even though my name was on half the paperwork, and I'd paid far more than half the bills I was living in their house. Cooked in their kitchen, helped raise their children, with my money, my time, my energy. All of those memories, all of those tiny moments sat with me at that kitchen table on Thanksgiving morning while my coffee cooled. They lined up neatly in my mind, forming a pattern I could not longer ignore. They hadn't invited me to live with them out of love. They had brought me in because I was useful, and the moment I became inconvenient, they left me behind without one real conversation. I finished my coffee and stood up. For 3 years, I told myself this was my home. It wasn't. It was a house I had helped buy and fill, where my presence was taken for granted, and my wallet was always open. As I rinsed my cup and set it in the dish rack, a thought came over me. One that should have been terrifying, but wasn't. I'm done. Not with loving my family, That isn't something you can just turn off. But I was done pretending this arrangement was good for me. I picked up Amanda's note again and traced a finger over the smooth, easy strokes of her handwriting. I could practically see her writing it on the way out the door, maybe between choosing swimsuits and booking tours. You wouldn't have liked the flight. That line bothered me more than anything, not because it was cruel, but because it was lazy. It assumed a lot and asked nothing. Had I ever said I hated flying? Harold and I flew to Arizona to visit his sister years ago. It wasn't exactly comfortable, but I survived. The truth was simple. They'd planned a family vacation, Hawaii, Thanksgiving week, and at some point, they decided the family did not include me. I folded the note and placed it carefully back on the counter. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I walked slowly through the living room. My slippers whispered across the hardwood floors I'd paid to have refinished last year. Sunlight poured through the windows, highlighting the dust in the air. I paused in front of the television, a 65-inch monster mounted on the wall. Michael had said he wanted it for the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Amanda said it was too much and unnecessary. When I offered to buy it as a Christmas present, suddenly it was perfect. I ran my fingers along the back of the cream-colored sofa. Amanda had fallen in love with it in a catalog. Modern, straight lines, firm cushions. It cost $3,000. I paid for it without blinking. The coffee table, the end tables, the lamps, the bookshelf, all bought by me. I wandered into the kitchen, opening cabinet doors, dishes, glasses, the copper pots and pans Amanda had admired in that fancy kitchen store I'd bought them for her birthday, smiling as she squealed with delight. The stainless steel refrigerator with double doors and an ice dispenser. Their old one was fine, but it didn't suit Amanda's vision for the kitchen. The washer and dryer in the laundry room, the patio furniture out back, the lawnmower in the garage, the Wi-Fi router, the high-powered blender that cost $600. Amanda's pride and joy for her morning smoothies, not because they'd always marched up to me and asked directly. No, they'd sigh about how old something was, talk about how nice a new one would be, complain about how expensive everything had become, and I'd step in every time, because in my mind, that's what love looked like. I went back to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed. Harold's photograph sat on my nightstand, taken about 10 years before he died. He was laughing at something just out of frame, the corners of his eyes wrinkled up. "What would you say about all this?" I asked him softly. Harold had always been the practical one. Generous? Yes, but not blind. He would have seen this pattern forming long before I did. He would have taken my hand and asked why I felt I had to earn my place with money. I touched the frame, then opened my nightstand drawer. Inside was a blue folder held closed with a little elastic band. I've always been organized, the sort of woman who keeps receipts, warranty cards, and instruction manuals sorted in neat piles. Harold used to tease me about it. "You keep track of everything," he'd say, half laughing. I pulled out the folder and opened it page after page of receipts. Every major purchase I'd made since moving into this house. My name printed clearly at the top of each one. Some of the slips were yellowed with age. Others were crisp and new. The television, the sofa, the appliances, the furniture, even the cashier's check for the down payment with my signature at the bottom. Each piece of paper was a moment when I believed I was doing the right thing. that I was building something solid for all of us. Looking at them now, they felt like something else. Evidence. I closed the folder and rested it on my lap. It didn't weigh much, but it meant a lot. "It's all mine anyway," I whispered. Hearing myself say those words out loud, something inside me loosened. I stood, grabbed my phone from the charger, and opened the browser. My fingers are slow on that tiny keyboard, but I managed. Moving company near me. Several names popped up. I scrolled through, reading reviews. One in particular caught my eye. Everyone said the same things. Family-owned, professional, respectful. I tapped the phone number. It rang 3 times. "Good morning, Prestige Moving Services. How can I help you?" A man's friendly voice answered. "Good morning," I said. "I'd like to arrange a move for tomorrow if possible." He paused. "Tomorrow? That's Thanksgiving, ma'am? We do work holidays, but there's an extra fee." "That's fine," I said without hesitation. "I can pay it." "All right," he replied, and I heard the faint clacking of a keyboard. "Can I get your name and address?" I gave him both carefully. "And how much are we moving? A full house, or just a few items?" I looked around my bedroom and pictured the entire house. "Quite a bit," I said. "I'll have a list ready when you arrive." "Perfect. We can have a crew there by 8 o'clock in the morning. Does that work?" "That works beautifully." We went over a few final details, and then I hung up. The house was still silent around me, but this time the quiet felt different. Not empty, not sad. Waiting. I sat down at my desk, took out a notepad and pen, and at the top of the first page, I wrote, "Items to move." Then I opened the blue folder and started writing. It's amazing how much you remember when you actually sit down to look at your life instead of just moving through it. The television went on the list first. I could still see Michael's grin when I told him I wanted to buy it as a Christmas gift. He'd done the polite, "Oh, Mom, that's too much" routine, but his eyes gave him away. Then the sofa set, that cream one from the catalog. The armchair that matched, the ottoman, the coffee table. I remembered the day Amanda and I went to the furniture store together. She moved through the displays like a woman on a mission, testing every couch and chair. When she found the one she liked, she turned to me with hopeful eyes. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she'd said. And it was, just never particularly comfortable. I wrote it all down. Next came the kitchen. That took up half a page on its own. The refrigerator Amanda had called outdated before I replaced it. The microwave, the stand mixer, the food processor, the espresso machine. Michael had only mentioned once in passing before I ordered it the next day. Then the blender, that $600 beast Amanda had fallen in love with at a friend's house. I'd wrapped it in birthday paper and watched her face light up when she opened it. "You spoil me, Mom," she'd said, hugging me. At the time, her joy had felt like enough. Now, it felt more like a reminder. The washer and dryer came next. When their old set quit, Michael had talked about looking at used machines, maybe managing with laundromats for a while. I'd stepped in and bought them the good set. Extra capacity, steam clean, delicate cycles. All the bells and whistles Amanda had gushed over at her sister's house. "This is too much," Michael had said when they arrived. But he never sent them back page after page. I kept going. The lawnmower, the patio furniture, the grill Michael used every summer weekend. Little things that didn't feel so little when you added them up. The thing about giving is that it feels wonderful at first. You see someone's eyes light up, you feel useful, important, generous. But there's a line between giving because you want to and giving because you're afraid of what will happen if you stop. Somewhere along the way, I had crossed that line without even noticing. By the time I got to the utility bills, my fingers were starting to cramp. About 18 months ago, I'd quietly taken over the electric bill after 1 month when it was higher than expected because of the air conditioning, then the water bill, then the internet, then the home insurance. Michael never demanded it outright. He just dropped hints about money being tight. I stepped in every single time. When I finally put down my pen, I had 3 full pages of neat, careful handwriting. Each line represented money, yes, but also time, energy, and pieces of myself I'd handed over without asking for much in return. The afternoon light was slanting through my window when I checked the clock. 2:30. I'd been at it for hours. My stomach grumbled a little, reminding me I hadn't eaten since that early cup of coffee. I tucked the receipts and my list back into the blue folder and went downstairs. The kitchen no longer felt like ours. It felt like a space I was simply passing through. I opened the pantry and my eyes caught on a can of pumpkin puree tucked in the back. I smiled to myself. I had planned to bake 3 pumpkin pies that day. 1 for Thanksgiving dinner, 1 for Michael to take to work, 1 for the grandkids to enjoy. Later, plans change. I decided to bake just 1, a small one, for me. I gathered the ingredients: flour, sugar, eggs, cream, spices. My hands moved through the familiar motions, mixing the dough, rolling it out, fitting it into the pie dish. The pumpkin filling came together smooth and fragrant. As the pie baked, the warm smell of cinnamon and nutmeg filled the empty house. But this time, it didn't feel like I was preparing for others. It felt like I was finally preparing something for myself. When the pie came out of the oven, I didn't wait for it to cool completely. I cut a generous slice, sat down, and ate it slowly, bite by bite. It tasted like every Thanksgiving I'd ever made. Sweet, spiced, comforting, but this one felt different. When I finished, I felt full in a way that wasn't just about food. That night, I slept through without tossin', without waking in the dark to stare at the ceiling and wonder if I'd done enough, given enough, bent enough. Because I knew, tomorrow, everything would be different. Friday morning, my body woke me at 5:30 as usual, but the feeling inside me was new. Not dread, not heaviness, readiness. I showered, put on comfortable clothes, and made myself a proper breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a fresh pot of coffee. While I ate, I reviewed my list and receipts one more time. Everything was in order. Around 7:30, I heard the rumble of a truck in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw a large white moving van with blue lettering. 3 men climbed out. All young, probably in their 20s or early 30s, wearing matching blue shirts and work gloves. I'd baked chocolate chip cookies the night before after I made my pie. I set them on a plate and put on another pot of coffee, then opened the front door before they could knock. "Good morning," I greeted them with a smile. "You must be from Prestige Moving?" The tallest of the 3, with sandy hair and kind eyes, stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Jason. This is Marcus," he said, nodding at a solidly built man behind him. "And that's Tyler." Tyler, the youngest, lifted his hand in a small wave. "Well, come in," I said. "I made coffee and cookies. You'll need your strength today." They exchanged surprised glances, but followed me inside, wiping their feet on the mat. "This is very kind of you," Jason said, accepting a mug. "Most folks are pretty stressed on moving day." "Oh, I'm not stressed at all," I answered, and I meant it. "I've planned this very carefully." Tyler bit into a cookie, and his eyes widened. "These are amazing, ma'am." "Thank you, dear. My Harold always said my chocolate chip cookies were his favorite." I set down the tray and picked up my blue folder. "Now," I said calmly, "let me explain how this will work. I've made a list of everything we're taking, and I have receipts for each item. I want to make sure there's no confusion about what's mine." Jason's brows rose slightly as he glanced at the list. "This is quite a bit of furniture and appliances," he said. "I know," I replied. "I've been very generous over the years." I smiled faintly. "But now it's time for these things to come home with me." Marcus looked around. "So, the TV, the couch, the tables, everything?" "Everything on that list," I answered. "If you'd like, I can show you receipts as we go. I'm very organized." Jason studied me for a moment, understanding dawning in his eyes. He saw what kind of day this was going to be. Not a frantic, messy move, but something deliberate. "That won't be necessary, ma'am," he said at last. "We just move what you tell us to move." "Perfect," I replied. "Let's start in the living room." They got to work. I sat in the one chair I wasn't taking, my blue folder in my lap, and watched. They wrapped the 65-inch TV carefully in padded blankets. Tyler unplugged and coiled every cable neatly. Marcus and Jason lifted it onto a dolly and rolled it out the door. Then they wrestled the cream sofa through the doorway, counting off together. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Piece by piece, my list began to shrink. The coffee table, the matching end tables, the lamps, the bookshelf, bare now, but bought by me, so it went too. Amanda's decorating books could stay in the empty room. By 9:30, the living room was empty except for the chair I sat in. Without the furniture, the room looked oddly large. Sunlight showed the square indents in the carpet where the sofa and tables had rested. The walls looked naked without pictures. "Kitchen next?" Jason asked, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "Yes, please," I said. "The refrigerator, microwave, espresso machine, blender, stand mixer, food processor. And there's a mixer in the pantry as well." Tyler opened the refrigerator and nearly jumped. "Ma'am, there's a lot of food in here." "I know," I said. "Just take everything out and leave it on the counter. They can handle that part themselves." One by one, every appliance came out of the kitchen. The refrigerator left a dark, empty rectangle behind it. The counters slowly cleared. By 11 o'clock, they'd moved on to the bedrooms. My bed, my dresser, my nightstands, my linens, the washer and dryer from the laundry room, the vacuum cleaner I'd bought last spring. Room by room, the house transformed itself into a shell. At lunchtime, I insisted they sit and eat the sandwiches and more cookies I'd prepared. They were grateful. Tired, a little sweaty, but polite. "You're handling this better than most," Jason said halfway through his sandwich. "A lot of people are in tears on moving day." "I've cried enough," I told him honestly. "Right now, I'm just done. Sometimes you know it's time to go." He nodded slowly, and I could tell he understood more than he said. By noon, the truck was packed tight. The house echoed when we walked. Bare walls, bare floors, bare counters. I walked through each room one last time. No melodramatic goodbye, just Acknowledgement. This was where I'd given too much. This was where I stopped. In the kitchen, I paused. Amanda's note was still on the counter under the turkey magnet. I left it exactly where it was. Next to it, I placed the stack of bills that had arrived that morning. Electric, water, internet. Now all in Michael's name. Earlier in the week, I'd called each company and had the accounts transferred out of mine. They'd figure it out. Then I took my house keys off my keyring, both copies, and laid them beside the note and bills. From my purse, I pulled a red ribbon, the kind I usually used for Christmas presents. I tied the keys together with a small, neat bow. A goodbye gift. Jason appeared at the doorway. "We're all set, ma'am. Ready whenever you are." "Just a moment," I said. I let my eyes sweep over the kitchen, the blank spot where the refrigerator used to stand, the bare curtain rods where my hand-sewn curtains once hung. Then I picked up my purse, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked out of the house without looking back. Jason held the door for me, and I stepped into the cool November air. The sky was clear and bright, the kind of day that makes you feel awake. The front door clicked shut behind me. The sound felt final. "Where to, ma'am?" Jason asked gently. I gave him the address of my new place, then climbed into my car. In the rear-view mirror, the house looked like a stage after the show is over. The moving truck pulled out behind me. We drove away. The Meadowbrook Senior Living Complex sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees. It wasn't fancy or grand, just a low brick building with neat flower beds and a parking lot that always seemed to have open spaces. I'd visited twice before, signing the lease, walked the halls, peeked into the community room, checked whether people smiled at each other when they passed. It had felt right. The building manager, Patricia, a woman with silver hair and a kind face, met me in the lobby. "Welcome home, Mrs. Patterson," she said, handing me a small envelope. "Here are your keys. Unit 2B, second floor. Elevator's right down the hall, and if you need anything, my office is just over there." "Thank you, Patricia. We'll keep an eye out for your movers," she added with a smile. I rode the elevator to the second floor alone. The doors opened onto a carpeted hallway with soft lighting and numbered doors. 2B was the third on the right. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was smaller than what I'd just left, but it was enough. More than enough. Sunlight spilled into the living room, shining across honey-colored floors. The kitchen was compact but practical, with clean white cabinets and newer appliances. One bedroom, one bathroom, a little balcony overlooking a courtyard. I walked from room to room, opening cabinets, testing the water, standing out on the balcony to breathe in the air. It smelled faintly of paint, cleaning supplies, and something else, possibility. 20 minutes later, the movers arrived. I directed them where to put everything. The TV went on the living room wall. The sofa faced it. My bed and dresser fit perfectly in the bedroom. The nightstand went exactly where I wanted it. Piece by piece, my things found their new places. By mid-afternoon, the truck was empty and my apartment was full. "Anything else you need, ma'am?" Jason asked as they gathered their gear. "No, you've done more than enough. Thank you." I handed each of them cash, more than they expected, judging by their protests. "You've all been wonderful," I said, "and it's Thanksgiving. Consider it my way of saying I'm grateful. Kindness should be paid, back when you can." After they left, I stood in the middle of the living room and just breathed. It was quiet, not empty, peaceful. I started to unpack, slowly, on my own schedule. Harold's photograph went up on the wall, where I could see it from the sofa. The teapot he'd given me for our 25th anniversary went on the counter. My dishes filled the cupboards. Around 4 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. I opened it to find a woman about my age standing there with a covered dish. Her hair was short and white, her eyes bright behind small glasses. "Hi," she said with a cheerful smile. "I'm Ruth. I live in 2D down the hall. Patricia mentioned you were moving in today. I brought dinner. Moving wears you out." My throat tightened at the unexpected kindness. "That's so thoughtful. Please, come in." She stepped inside and looked around. "Oh, you've already made it cozy," she said. "Some people take weeks. You've got the touch." "Thank you," I said. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a pot." "I'd love some." We sat at my little kitchen table while she told me about Meadowbrook, about the Tuesday book club, the small garden out back, the movie nights in the community room. "It's a good group," she said. "People look out for each other, but no one's nosy. It's a nice balance." That sounds perfect. She stayed about half an hour. By the time she left, I didn't feel quite so new. That evening, I warmed the chicken and rice casserole Ruth had brought. Simple, comforting food, I ate it on my sofa while the sun went down outside my window, turning the sky orange, pink, then purple. I washed my dish, made myself a cup of tea in Harold's teapot, and took it out to the balcony. The courtyard below was still. A few benches, a small fountain, strings of Christmas lights in the trees, waiting to be turned on. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Once, twice, 3 times. I could hear it faintly through the open balcony door. I took another sip of tea and watched a small bird hop near the fountain. The phone kept vibrating. I smiled gently to myself, turned my gaze back to the darkening sky, and let it ring. For the first time in 3 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, and nothing was going to pull me away from that moment. My peace lasted 5 days. 5 quiet, lovely days spent learning my new routines: morning coffee on the balcony, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, evening tea with a book I'd been meaning to read for years. Ruth visited twice more. I met Bernard from down the hall and Louise from upstairs. People chatted, laughed, and went back to their lives. No one demanded a thing from me. On Wednesday evening, I was in the kitchen making dinner when I finally noticed my phone buzzing in the bedroom. By the time I went to change into my pajamas, the screen was lit up and vibrating. 18 missed calls. I picked up the phone and looked at the call log. Michael, Amanda. Unknown numbers from the same area code. My finger hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to dial back immediately. What if something was wrong? What if someone was hurt? But another part, the part that had grown stronger every day I'd been in my own place, told me to wait, so I did. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and went to the living room. Sitting on my own sofa, the one I'd paid for and moved, I opened my messages. The first text was from Amanda, sent at 3:47 p.m. "Mom, we just got home. Where are you? Please call us." 10 minutes later, "Mom, this isn't funny. Something happened to the house. Call me right now." Then Michael's messages. "Greater than Mom. Please answer your phone. The house was robbed. Everything's gone. We need to talk to you immediately." "Mom, I'm worried. Where are you?" I took a sip of tea and opened my voicemail. There were 7 messages. I put the phone on speaker. Amanda's voice came through first, high and shaky. "Mom! Oh my God! Mom, where are you? We just got back and the house is empty. Someone took everything. The TV, the furniture, even the refrigerator. We're calling the police. Please, please call us." Next was Michael, trying to sound controlled. "Mom, it's me. Something happened while we were gone. I need you to call me as soon as you get this. It's serious." Each message grew more frantic. Voices raised, breathing fast, words tumbling over each other. When the last voicemail ended, I set the phone down. Then I opened the Ring camera app. Michael had installed the security system 2 years ago to watch for packages and keep an eye on the door. He'd added me to the account so I could check the door when packages arrived. He'd never removed my access. The camera was still running. I scrolled back to that afternoon and found the recording from 3:42 p.m. I tapped it. The video showed the front door opening. Amanda walked in first, pulling a rolling suitcase, her face relaxed and sun-kissed. She was laughing over her shoulder at Michael, who followed with the kids. They looked happy, rested, pleasantly tired from travel. Amanda rolled her suitcase toward the living room, probably intending to drop it next to the sofa. I watched her step into the room and come to a full stop. Her smile vanished. Her mouth fell open. Her hand slipped off the suitcase handle. Michael stepped up behind her, his brow creasing. "What the—" His voice came through small but clear. "Where's everything?" Amanda moved farther into the empty room, her hands coming up toward her face. "The couch," she whispered. "The TV. Everything's gone." Michael rushed toward the kitchen. I heard him shout, "The refrigerator! Amanda! They took the refrigerator!" The kids, sensing the panic, started crying. The youngest clung to Amanda's leg. The older one kept asking, "What happened? Mom, what happened?" Amanda pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling 911, she said. Michael paced back and forth in the hall, running his hands through his hair, looking from room to room like the furniture might suddenly reappear. I sat back on my sofa in my quiet apartment and took another sip of tea. I fast-forwarded. The police arrived, went inside, walked through the house. I watched Michael and Amanda motion wildly, talking fast, their faces tense. One officer wrote notes, the other listened. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to, I knew. After a while, the officers left. Michael and Amanda ended up sitting on the living room floor because there was nowhere else to sit. Looking shell-shocked, I closed the app. Outside my window, the courtyard lights flicked on one by one. Inside, my living room felt warm, steady, safe. My phone buzzed again, another call from Michael. I glanced at Harold's photograph on the wall. He seemed to be smiling, that half-amused, half-proud smile of his, the one he used to wear when I finally stood my ground about something. "I saw enough," I murmured to him. "I don't need to watch the rest." I flipped my phone face down, picked up my book, and went back to reading. Whatever came next was no longer mine to fix. The knock I'd been expecting came 2 days later, on Friday afternoon. It was a firm knock. 3 solid taps, not a neighbor. Not Ruth with a casserole. I turned off the stove, dried my hands, and walked to the door. Looking through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers, one younger, dark hair, earnest face. The other, older, gray at his temples, the kind of expression you see on a man who has dealt with every kind of drama and learned patience from it. I opened the door with a small smile. "Good afternoon, officers. Can I help you?" "Ma'am," the younger one said, checking a small notepad. "Are you Margaret Patterson?" "I am." "We're here regarding a report filed by your son, Michael Wright," he said. "He reported a theft at his residence and indicated you might have information." "I see," I replied. "Well, please come in. I have a fresh pot of coffee." They looked at each other. The older one smiled faintly. "That would be appreciated, ma'am." I poured 2 cups, added cream and sugar to a small tray with a plate of cookies, and brought everything to the coffee table. They sat on my sofa while I settled into my armchair. The younger officer took a sip and looked around the room. It probably did not escape his attention that my apartment contained a large TV, a familiar-looking sofa, and several items that might match Michael's description. "You mentioned my son," I said calmly. "He told you I might know something about his robbery?" "Yes, ma'am," the older one replied. "He and his wife returned from a trip to find the house emptied of furniture and appliances. They said you'd moved out recently and believe you may have information about what happened." "I can absolutely clear this up," I said. "Would you like to see my receipts?" The younger officer blinked. "Your receipts?" "Yes, dear," I said, rising. "For everything in question." I brought them the blue folder and handed it to the older officer. He opened it and began flipping through. 65-inch television, he read aloud. "Purchased December 2023. Name, Margaret Patterson." He looked up at me. "You bought this TV?" "I did," I said. "A Christmas gift for my son. I have the matching card statement if you need it." He continued turning pages. "Sofa set, $3,000. Refrigerator, $2,800. Washer and dryer." He kept reading, his expression growing more serious. "Ma'am," he said at last, "this is quite a list." "I'm aware," I said simply. "I helped my family, or at least, I believed I was helping." The younger officer frowned at the papers. "But all of these items, they were at your son's address?" "Yes," I nodded. "I lived there for 3 years. I bought those things while I lived there with my money. I have proof of every purchase. When I chose to leave, I took what belongs to me." The older officer leaned forward a little. "Why did you move out, if you don't mind my asking?" I met his eyes and answered plainly. "I woke up alone on Thanksgiving morning. My son, his wife, and their children had flown to Hawaii without telling me. They left a note saying I wouldn't have liked the flight." I smiled faintly. That was enough for me to understand how they saw me. So I made a choice too. The younger officer's face softened. "They went on vacation without you and left you there on Thanksgiving?" "They did." The room was quiet for a moment. The older officer closed the folder gently. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, voice respectful, "I don't see any crime here. As far as I can tell, you legally purchased these items and took your property with you. That's your right." "That was my understanding," I said. "I just wanted to be sure. I don't want any trouble, but I also won't be accused of something I didn't do." He nodded appreciatively. "You've documented everything better than most people. To be honest, I wish more folks kept records like this." The younger one still looked slightly stunned, but he was catching up. The older officer handed the folder back.
If your family gives you any problems or tries to harass you over this, he said, you call the number on this card, ask for me.
Thank you, I replied. I appreciate that very much. I walked them to the door. Just as we stepped into the hallway, the elevator dinged and the doors slid open. Michael and Amanda rushed out. Amanda's face was flushed. Michael's fists were clenched at his sides.
Officers! Amanda burst out. Did you talk to her? Did she tell you what she did? She robbed us, Michael added sharply. She emptied our house.
The older officer held up a hand.
Mr. Wright, Mrs. Wright, he said evenly. We've reviewed your mother's documentation. Every major item removed from your home was purchased by her. She has receipts for all of it.
Amanda stared.
But those were in our house. We used them. Ma'am, he replied, ownership belongs to whoever paid for the items. Your mother did. She is within her rights.
Michael shook his head.
That can't be legal. That's our furniture, our appliances. Legally, the officer said calmly, they're hers. I'm afraid there's no crime here. He nodded once to me. Have a nice day, Mrs. Patterson.
Thank you, officer, I said quietly. Then I turned to Michael and Amanda. I hope Hawaii was everything you wanted, I said gently. Before either of them could respond, I stepped back into my apartment and closed the door. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived by certified mail. I signed for it and set it on the table. The envelope had the county courthouse printed in the corner. I made myself a cup of tea before opening it. Inside was a summons to small claims court. Michael and Amanda were suing me for emotional damages. They claimed my actions had caused them severe distress and financial hardship. They wanted $12,000. I read the letter twice, then set it down next to my teacup. An hour later, Ruth knocked on my door. She took one look at my face and said, "Something's wrong." "What is it?" I handed her the papers. Her eyebrows shot up as she read. "They're suing you," she said slowly. "After everything?" "Apparently," I said. "Do you have a lawyer?" she asked. "I don't think I'll need one," I said calmly. "I have my receipts, and the truth is simple. Sometimes the best thing you can bring into a fight is good paperwork." Ruth shook her head. "You're stronger than you look, Margaret." "I'm not strong," I said. "I'm just tired of being scared." The court date was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early December. The sky was gray and heavy, threatening snow. I woke at my usual time, took a long shower, and put on my nicest coat. The charcoal one with pearl buttons that Harold used to compliment underneath. I wore a simple dress and comfortable shoes. My purse held the blue folder. When I checked the mirror before leaving, the woman looking back at me was calm. The courthouse downtown was a brick building with stone steps and big windows. I arrived 15 minutes early and checked in with the clerk, then followed the signs to the right courtroom. The hallway outside was full of nervous people, lawyers juggling folders, couples bickering in low voices, individuals staring at the floor. I found an empty space on a bench and sat, folding my hands in my lap. 10 minutes later, Michael and Amanda appeared. Amanda wore a sharp navy suit. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She'd clearly dressed for battle. Michael wore a shirt and tie. His face was already red, with anger, embarrassment, or both. They saw me. Amanda's eyes narrowed. Michael looked away. They sat far down the bench, as if I might contaminate them by proximity. When our case was called, we walked into the courtroom together, but apart. Me to the right,
them to the left. The room was smaller than what you see in movies. The judge's bench at the front, a few rows of chairs in the back. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. The judge, a middle-aged man with gray-in hair and glasses, took his seat and shuffled through his docket. Case number 4782, Wright versus Patterson. He read, "Let's proceed." Michael and Amanda stood. Amanda did most of the talking. "Your Honor," she began, voice tight but rehearsed. "My mother-in-law removed furniture and appliances from our home without our permission. While she claims she purchased them, they were part of our household. We depended on them. Her actions have caused serious emotional distress and financial hardship for our family. We're requesting $12,000 in damages." The judge listened, scribbling notes. When she finished, he turned to me. "Mrs. Patterson, how do you respond?" I stood. "Your Honor, I don't deny moving those items," I said. "But I purchased every single one of them with my own funds. I lived with my son and his family for 3 years. I kept receipts for all major purchases. When I decided to leave, I took what belonged to me." I walked to the front and handed my blue folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. He opened it and began reading. The room was silent except for the sound of turning pages. He read for several minutes, pausing on some receipts, flipping faster through others. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, "these records are extremely thorough." "Thank you, Your Honor," I replied. "I believe in keeping things in writing." He turned toward Michael and Amanda. "Mr. and Mrs. Wright," he said, "do you have any documentation showing that you paid for these items?" Michael shifted. "They were in our house," he said weakly. "We used them." "That's not what I asked," the judge replied, his tone still calm. "Did you purchase them?" Silence. Amanda jumped in. "Your Honor, it was a shared home. She was contributing to the household," she said. "These purchases were part of that arrangement." "That may be how you saw it, ma'am," the judge answered. "But in the eyes of the law, ownership belongs to the person who paid your mother-in-law's name is on every receipt I've seen." He closed the folder. "As for emotional distress," he continued, "being upset that someone took their own property does not meet the legal standard." "But," Michael started. The judge held up a hand. "Mr. Wright," he said firmly, "I understand you're unhappy, but life being inconvenient does not equal a legal claim." He picked up his gavel. "Case dismissed." He gave them a brief, pointed look. "I strongly suggest you consider the evidence before filing future claims." He added. He banged the gavel once. The sound echoed through the small room. I let out a quiet breath. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. He nodded and moved on to the next case. I retrieved my folder, slipped it into my purse, and walked toward the door. As I passed, I heard Amanda hiss the word, "selfish," under her breath. I didn't slow down. Michael stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. I stepped out into the hallway and then outside. The air was cold and sharp, the sky full of soft, drifting snowflakes. I stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, feeling the chill on my cheeks. You would think, standing there alone after essentially losing your son and your place in his family, that the main feeling would be sadness. It wasn't. It was relief. 4 months rolled by. Winter settled in, then melted into early spring. The trees outside Meadowbrook went from bare to budding to full, and green life found a new rhythm. Tuesday mornings, I went to book club with Ruth and a few other women. We drank coffee and argued about mystery novels. Wednesday afternoons,
I volunteered at the community center, helping other seniors learn how to use email, apps, and video calls. Thursdays, I painted in the art room downstairs. To my surprise, I wasn't half bad with watercolors. My apartment filled up with little joys. A bright throw pillow, Ruth talked me into buying a small plant from Bernard. Paintings of simple scenes, a bowl of fruit, a path through trees that I'd created myself. The silence in my home was never heavy. It had its own kind of music. The hum of the fridge, the shuffle of pages, the occasional laugh from the hallway. My phone stayed mostly quiet. No calls from Michael. No messages from Amanda. I assumed the kids were told some version of events where I was the villain. That hurt, sometimes. Late at night, when the world is still and the mind wants something to chew on, that pain would poke at me. But it didn't swallow me. Because I'd learned something important. You can't force people to value you. You can only decide how much you value yourself. And so, another Thanksgiving came. I woke at 5:30 to sunlight sliding through my curtains and the smell of coffee already brewing from the timer I'd set the night before. This Thanksgiving felt different. I wasn't bracing myself, waiting to see who would show up, what mood people would be in, whether I'd say or do the wrong thing. The day in front of me was open and peaceful. I'd invited Ruth and 2 other neighbors, Bernard and Louise, for dinner. Just 4 people. No drama. Bernard was bringing rolls from his favorite bakery. Louise had promised her famous cranberry sauce. I was roasting a small turkey and making potatoes and vegetables. I moved through my kitchen with an ease I hadn't felt in years. The turkey went into the oven. Potatoes simmered on the stove. I took down my good china, pieces that had belonged to my mother and then to me and no one else. I set 4 plates, 4 napkins, 4 glasses. Then I stood there for a moment, staring at the table. On impulse, I went back to the cabinet and took out 1 more plate. I set it at the head of the table. Not because I expected Michael to walk through the door. Not because I was clinging to the fantasy that everything would magically repair itself, but because some part of me still believed in leaving room. Room for forgiveness, for some future conversation, or simply for hope itself. Ruth arrived first with a pumpkin pie that smelled heavenly. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said, hugging me. "Your place smells amazing." "Come in," I said. "I'm so glad you're here." Bernard and Louise arrived together, laughing about something from the elevator. Bernard's bag of rolls was still warm. Louise's cranberry sauce sparkled in a glass bowl like rubies. We moved around the kitchen and living room like we'd been doing this for years. Bernard mashed potatoes. Ruth poured drinks. Louise fussed with the table. By noon, everything was ready. "Shall we say grace?" Louise asked. We joined hands around the table. 4 people, 4 lives with their own stories, linked for a moment. Louise said a short blessing. Thankful for food, for friendship, for another year. We squeezed each other's hands once before letting go. The meal wasn't fancy or huge, but it was perfect. We talked and laughed. Bernard told stories about his years teaching. Ruth shared updates about her daughter in California. Louise asked how my painting was going. No one barked orders. No one expected me to jump up and fix things. Everyone passed plates and helped themselves. It felt like what family is supposed to feel like. Choice, not obligation. After dinner, we moved to the living room with coffee and pie. Ruth pulled out a deck of cards and we played rummy
while the afternoon light turned golden. Around 4 o'clock, they gathered their coats and leftovers. "This was wonderful," Louise said, hugging me. "Thank you for having us." "Let's do it again next month," Bernard added. "I'll bring the main course." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. After they left, I cleaned up slowly, wiped counters, put dishes away, wrapped up leftovers for tomorrow. The apartment still hummed with the warmth of the day. I poured myself a cup of tea and went out to the balcony. The air was cool, but not biting. I wrapped a cardigan around my shoulders and watched the sun sink, painting the sky in orange and gold. I thought about the Thanksgiving a year ago, waking up in a house that suddenly didn't feel like mine, holding a note that told me I was an afterthought. Then I thought about everything that had come after: the quiet decision, the careful planning, the moving truck, the courthouse, the new apartment, the book club, the card games, the laughter. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped trying to shrink myself to fit into somebody else's life. Was I sad that Michael was gone from my life? Yes, he's my son. That doesn't stop mattering, no matter how old either of you get. But was I sad about what I'd done? No, because here, in this small, peaceful apartment filled with furniture I'd bought for myself and a life I'd built intentionally, I'd finally found the one person I'd been neglecting me. The woman Harold fell in love with. The one who knew her own mind and wasn't afraid to stand her ground. She hadn't disappeared. She'd only been hiding under years and years of trying to earn love by giving more and more of herself. Away. My phone sat quietly on the little table inside. No calls, no demands, no emergencies that only I could solve. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I heard something I hadn't heard in a long time. My own voice. It didn't say, "You should have done more," or "You're selfish." It said, "You are enough. You deserve peace." Walking away from people who don't see your worth is not cruelty. It's survival. The sky darkened. Stars began to peek through the fading light. I finished my tea and went back inside, closing the balcony door behind me. I glanced at the 5th plate still sitting on the table, empty. For a second, I thought about putting it away. Then I decided to leave it just a little longer. Not as an invitation, not as a promise, just as a reminder that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or putting yourself back where you were hurt. Sometimes forgiveness just means setting the anger down so you don't have to carry it anymore. I washed the plate and put it with the others, turned off the lights, checked the locks, went into my bedroom. Before getting into bed, I stopped in front of a Harold's picture. "We did okay today," I told him. "I think you would have liked Bernard. He tells bad jokes like you used to." In the frame, Harold smiled. Forever caught in a moment of joy, I lay down and pulled the covers up, surrounded by the soft hum of a home that was truly mine. They had left me behind that Thanksgiving morning, probably assuming I would stay where they put me. Grateful, quiet, easy to overlook. But here's what they never understood. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes silence is where you gather your strength. Sometimes it's where you finally hear your own heart. Sometimes it's the first step toward taking your life back. Walking away from people who refuse to see your value doesn't make you heartless. It means you've finally seen it yourself. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, wrapped in a peace I had earned one decision, one receipt, one boundary at a time, every bill in my own name,
every item under my own roof. Every morning, feeling like a gift, not a duty. This is my life now, and it is beautiful. Before you go, I want to say thank you for staying with me through this whole story. If any part of it felt familiar, if you've ever felt invisible, used, or taken for granted, I'd really like to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts, your experience, or just let me know you're listening. And if this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories matter because they remind us that we are not alone in what we've lived through. Thank you for being here. Until next time.